I'd like to just start out by giving you just a little background on myself. My background is that I have been in clinical research for several decades, actually. Started out as a coordinator in academia. I'm based in New York City, and that's where I worked. I transitioned after becoming a site manager to industry and held positions as a monitor, study manager, did some quality oversight lead roles, and also site selection specialist in a variety of roles, ultimately transitioning to an independent consultant specializing in training about 7 years ago. So just giving you just a little capsule history on myself. The focus here will be on human performance management. We're going to look at defining what that is. We're going to look at some models. We're going to look at some tools that one can use. The objectives are up here. We're going to look at that human performance improvement model and then recognize that in CRA management model. That's what this really was focused on, is CRA management. It sounds to me like you're in project management. Then we're going to look at applying the model into the current practice, and we're looking at proactive CRA management, trying to avoid problems before they arise. You know, our tendency is to be very reactive in the past. That's what we've been, very reactive. We have an issue, we go out there and we try to fix it. What we're trying to do now is to be proactive, think about things that could happen and try to prevent them from happening at all. Okay? We're going to look at some case scenarios as well and look at when we do have CRA performance issues, how can we manage that effectively. Okay, now performance management is a science. It's not necessarily inherent. All right, so we have supervisors of CRAs, which are sort of line managers, but we have CRA managers, we have leads, we have project managers, vendor managers. So there are a lot of different components. It sounds to me like you're all sort of in the same type of group and dealing with the same type of model. So we don't have to, I'm not really sure. I should make assumptions like that. Are you dealing with vendors outside of your institution?
On occasion, but we don't really have any control of them. But, you know, we may review studies, and if we see issues with them, then we'll bring those up.
Okay. Yeah, that's, and quite frankly, you know, in industry, it's pretty much the same. You can have a study manager, and I know I do a lot of training with study managers and do leadership training with them. And even though they're called, quote, study managers, they're not really managing anybody in the traditional sense. They're not line managers, and they really have to exert a lot of their, you know, influence and lead by influence as opposed to direct management. And so there's that fine line. And the same thing when they have vendors that may not be performing really well. You know, they have, say it's Big Pharma. Big Pharma is notorious for having their ex-preferred vendors that they have 2 or 3 that they deal with, and that's it. And it's very hard to kind of break that cycle unless they've really done something egregious. So again, it's influencing. And so we'll take a look at that too, because a lot of that comes into play here. Okay, so again, you are performance managers, essentially. All right, so we know that monitoring is a required activity, and I know you mentioned investigator-initiated trials, and I have to give you a lot of credit if we're working with investigator-initiated trials because they are a challenge many times, maybe not so much for you, but they are usually a challenge because when you have an investigator who's created their own protocol, they feel kind of free to make changes and sometimes not going the conventional route of going through the formal amendment process and making sure they had an amendment approved and so on and so forth. And it gets a little more loose where it shouldn't be. It should be just as structured as a sponsored trial. So sometimes it's a little bit more, shall we say, challenging to kind of manage those particular trials. And I don't know if that's been your experience or if you have investigators that are really very compliant and following all the rules and basically are not deviating too much from what the process should be.